often in my speaking engagement, I speak to, what world becomes possible if leadership was rooted in humanity instead of dominance, right? Because what you see right now is dominance against dominance, escalation, tension. Could we try something new and de-escalate the situation with something like dominance versus humanity? Try to get the humanity to kind of de-escalate the situation and avoid what might be some serious clouds ahead.
Welcome to High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. This season, we're diving deeper with more solo episodes, where I'll share the experiences that have led to recognition by EY, Forbes, Fast Company, and others. Not as a boast, but as milestones on my entrepreneurial path. From growing multi-million-dollar firms to successful business exits and building high-performance teams with a global perspective. I'll reveal the insights and strategies from my journey and share them with you so that we can win together. Alongside these solo episodes, we'll have industry visionaries and thought leaders, and we'll explore effective leadership. Ready to empower your leadership journey with real success stories? Let's embark on this transformational journey together. Welcome to another episode of High Octane Leadership. I'm your host, Donald Thompson, and I'm joined today by Maria Brinck, a visionary leadership strategist and Gallup certified strengths coach dedicated to evolving how we lead in the era of global polycrisis. Born and raised in Sweden and Algeria, Maria has advised global organizations, but some of her biggest leadership lessons came from living in the Congo Basin Rainforest. Looking forward to unpacking that. That's going to be pretty cool. Today, we are here to discuss her blueprint, moving beyond traditional masculine monopoly, that monopoly of leadership to a more balanced, inclusive, and economically minded style that prioritizes collective well-being. We will also dive into her upcoming book, The Leadership That We Need. Maria, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Donald. I'm so excited to be with you here today.
One of the things that, and as we talked pre-show, and I got even more enthused about the conversation, but I want to start with being raised in the lessons that were learned in the Congo. So if you can unpack that a little bit and share a little bit of that backstory, that would be awesome.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was born and raised in Sweden, and I came over to United States as an international student to study international business. Got into kind of corporate America right after, worked in high tech, worked in biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, and sales, so very masculine environment. And frankly, after 8 years of that, I was burned out. I hit the wall of meaningless and was struggling. My sales results were still on the top, but I knew they were going to fall if I didn't make some changes. And I decided to make a big change, to move from corporate America, sales, great top companies in corporate America, and to live with the indigenous population, working with the rehabilitation of chimpanzees and gorillas in the Congo Basin Rainforest. So quite the opposite. I'm not necessarily promoting that move, but you can learn the lessons I learned there, I'm sure, from anywhere, if you just pay attention. But that's what it was for me. So I just got to see a completely different type of leadership style. I also got to reconnect with people, humanity, nature, animals, and got some incredible perspectives on life. Respect to past generations, and also always consider future generations, and just more of a holistic perspective that I think helps with the overall well-being. That would work for anyone's well-being. And also, I want to point out that you can actually learn from other sides of other places in your everyday life as well. But so it was a big move, and I have no regrets.
One of the questions that I had as we talked before, and then looking in the show notes, you made a statement, and obviously you're backing up with data, 10,000 years that leadership culture has not fundamentally changed. I'd love to hear your views on that, because that's a bold statement, which I love, right? That's one of the reasons we wanted to book you on the show. But I'd love to unpack that.
Yeah. So, when you are in an environment that this provided me in the rainforest, away from anything. I mean, we had no water, no running water, no electricity. It was as basic as it gets. You really do start to consider the big questions in life. And when I came back to United States, I really did realize I wanted to stay in corporate America, but I wanted to do so in a very different way from where I came from. I want to get out of sales, and instead I wanted to get into leadership. Because as you know, everything rises and falls on the shoulders of leadership. So if you want to have impact, that's where you need to be, right? Then I started thinking, the leadership we've had so far, and since dawn of civilization, which, as you know, is considered about 10,000 years, there's really not been that much of a change. We still grow and elevate and elect the alpha male, if you will, especially in crisis. And I would like to, and I hope we're going to get to speak about the crisis we're currently in with the polar crisis reality. But so I thought, these 10,000 years, we should probably be thankful. I mean, there were probably barbarians at the gate, and I probably would have been absolutely one of those that wanted one of those leaders. I mean, we even know that we go for tall people. Really? Tall people? As if they have some magical leadership skills that the rest of us do not have. And of course, that's not true. So you can see why there is a need to evolve our leadership mindset, because we know that the alpha, the hypermasculine, being tall, yes, back in the days, possibly that was good for our survival. Today, I would argue exactly the opposite, because what we need today is the diversity of thought that actually more of an inclusive, a full representation of humanity would bring us. Because we are in such a fast-paced, complex world, and you cannot just have that narrow mindset of the alpha male, the domineering kind of personality, speaking first, being the loudest, the most assertive, the more confident. That mindset and that kind of leadership style is just putting us short of what we really need.
Why do you think, and I'm going off script, and so we have plenty of tape so we can edit it out if it doesn't work out. Why do you think we have resisted that change?
Fantastic question. Yes, love that question. I'm glad you're going off script. And of course, I didn't get the script before, so this is all good. We were laughing about that. But, we have a subconscious, and maybe for some people conscious, bias in who we find qualified and capable to lead. So we go with what's comfortable, what we've seen before. And if we've never seen anything else but this type of leadership, this is the type of leaders we will vote in, grow, elevating organizations over and over and over again. Here's an interesting parallel that I drew a lot on, and that is just like back in the days, once upon a time, right? We craved these type of leaders to keep it safe and hopefully, keep our tribe safe. We also craved sugar and fat because we never knew where our next meal was going to come from, and we needed those calories. We know today, of course, that those same calories are not serving us very well, do they? And yet, here we have American population, 75% are either overweight or obese, and it's extremely difficult to make better choices. We know that we should, but we're not, because we want one thing, we need another. Exactly the same that I would say with leadership. We want one thing, we need a very different one. So it is in the survival kind of mechanism in psychology that we have, and something I write about in the book, The Leadership We Need, is that we haven't quite evolved that leadership mindset yet to actually go for something that would serve us better. Just like you need a well-balanced diet, you need a well-balanced leadership. And by the way, I also want to make clear that I'm not speaking to women and feminine in the expense of the male and men and masculinity. I'm talking about a balance between the two. Because often it's like, is this a book for women? Yes and no. It's absolutely should get more women into leadership. After all, it is half of our population, right? And they've never been a part of leadership or high decision making. So we need to get them in, but it's more than that. We also need to get the feminine traits in, and those are feminine traits that both men and women have, and change that culture of leadership as well. But it's not in the expense of men or the masculine. It's alongside.
No, I appreciate that. The way that I'm unpacking it as you're speaking and I'm taking some notes is, right, there's heads and tails on a coin that makes it qualified currency, right? And
There
you
you
need
go.
both of them. And so I really appreciate
Exactly.
that. Can you give me the definition of the poly crisis, right? Like we talked about that a little bit, but I want to get your definition and then we'll talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that is guided by the experts and science facts knows that we're in a polycrisis reality. And what I mean by the polycrisis reality, and to your point, not everybody used that term, so it's probably a new term for a lot of people, but it really entails climate change, unregulated AI, unregulated biotechnology, escalating nuclear threats, and of course the ongoing wars and genocides that keeps popping up everywhere over and over again, which is to me right there a sign that just maybe we should try something new. And so often in my speaking engagement, I speak to, what world becomes possible if leadership was rooted in humanity instead of dominance, right? Because what you see right now is dominance against dominance, escalation, tension. We've seen it with the Cold War of nuclear weapons. I have a feeling we're heading there again. Probably different players this time. Last time it was, United States, Russia. This time it looks like we're going to have United States, China, right, with AI. Could we try something new and de-escalate the situation with something like dominance versus humanity? Try to get the humanity to kind of de-escalate the situation and avoid what might be some serious clouds ahead.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I want to expand on that a little bit. I hear you. I agree with you. How do we make that change? Because we are dealing in, I think the way you describe it is we want one thing, we need another. That is that is a very deep rooted
Oh, absolutely.
issue, right? Because I'll give an example in my perspective in the U.S.
Yes.
And this isn't to
Yeah.
get overly political, but I don't understand it, right? So if you
Yeah.
think about farmers in our country, overwhelmingly voted for Trump,
Yeah.
right? Overwhelmingly.
Hmm.
Trump's policies on tariffs overwhelmingly hurt farmers.
Yeah.
I I don't. So that's an example of just like the disconnect in what we think we want, right? That
Yeah.
alpha leader, that XYZ,
Hmm.
versus that intellectual common sense,
Yeah.
right? Voting at least for your own self interest. I'm not even talking about they're right or wrong. It just is always confusing to me when people make decisions that are against their own self interest. And so you're describing moving away from that alpha male leader, right?
Hmm.
Moving to a more thoughtful, more balanced, of empathetic leadership. How does that actually happen? How are we gonna get there?
Yeah, I think the first thing that fantastic question, and I love how we're going off script completely, and I love that because these are the real questions, right? This is how we're digging deeper. So first of all, I think there is. It feels risky. It feels risky to try something new, right? So, for example, when we talked about dominance versus dominance, feels comfortable because that's all we know, So if you think about now, if we're going to put humanity first and not dominance, isn't that risky to be the first one kind of thing? Probably just like, and I can't speak to these farmers, and you should get one on the show here.
Yeah,
But
I'm
I
going
think,
to.
yeah, you should, because I can't speak to that. I can't speak to the political thinking there. But it would be interesting to ask that question. But my guess would be that it feels risky to vote for something that never voted for before, because I think they're always been, in my understanding of it, very conservative. Just like it would probably feel risky to have a country like United States of America that is used to be such a domineering country and kind of rule the world, command the world, to all of a sudden go all humanitarian, right? But if you think about it, look at the consequence and the results of this dominance versus dominance. Most likely next going to be, as I mentioned, US, China, and probably already is. What we don't see there is the de-escalation. And look at the cost and how risky that dominance versus dominance is. We know that in the last 100 years, that dominance versus dominance have killed off 150 to 231 million people due to wars and genocides. So that dominance versus dominance comes at a huge cost. Look at the dominance versus dominance if you look at even organization, corporate America, businesses in the world, and how they continue business as usual, even though, and high competition, squeezing out profit, even though we know that that kind of mindset have killed off 74% of our biodiversity since 1970. And we're not changing the way we conduct business to become, a service to life instead of just profit, profit, profit. So when we have that competition, we have that dominance, and we're going for all that we know in leadership, we're not evolving. It's not getting better. It's not becoming I'm not saying utopia because I don't think we're ever going to have a utopia, but it's not, the fact is that we know that our trajectory is not a good one. And we are not going to be around for much longer if we continue on this trajectory. And actually, I can put the data, I can put the numbers out there. I mean, if you look at, research coming out of Oxford, we're looking about 17%, 1/7 risk of not making it through the next 100 years on current trajectory. Even if that's half right, let's say 7-8%. I mean, that's unacceptable. That's not good leadership. And we need to change our trajectory.
That is powerful. I appreciate that. Let's get to your book, and I want to unpack some of the things there. And I look forward to reading the full book. You mentioned a phrase, masculine monopoly, and I'm interested in how do we begin to, well, one, defining how you came up with that and how you think about that, but also to my other questions. So then, what do we do about it? So I would like you to unpack it and then give us some guidance, some leadership on how do we think about some of these things differently.
Yeah, it is truly a monopoly. If we look at the numbers, we have about 93% corporate America led by men, 93% of nations worldwide led by men, all world religions, of course, huge in our cultural aspect, is led by, actually 100% are led by men. So it is truly a monopoly. And I think anyone, regardless of political views, religious beliefs, ideologies, would agree that monopolies are rarely a good thing. But that is what we have in leadership. So this will be a time where we really need to question that, because it's never really been questioned, and start thinking, what do we really need in leadership? And anyone, including you, Donald, you know a lot about business, obviously. We know that the greatest asset of any business, any organization, is the diversity of thought. If you have diversity of thought, you can really stay clear of many, many dark clouds ahead. And yet, that is also the hardest thing to get to in leadership, right? And we really need those leaders that invite that diversity of thought. And of course, that's not what we have in leadership at all. If you look at nations, world religions, and most organizations, because we still have that domineering personality on top that doesn't want to have or be questioned, speaks first, and want the kind of the good old boys club, so to speak, and the yes men, so to speak, to agree on everything they say. Very comfortable. And it's also comfortable to be a follower in that environment, because you really don't have to think much. You don't have to waste your energy. Just, yeah, sounds great. Let's do it kind of attitude. So it's on us. Hey, we can blame the bullies all day long, but let's face it, it's on you and I to change that culture. All of us, really. And we are not victims of that culture. We are full participants of that culture.
I really appreciate that. A lot of times when we are talking about leadership, and it's a good thing, and I do as well. We don't describe the responsibility for the followers, for the team members, for the leaders to make the changes required to put pressure on the leadership, to share with leadership other points of view. I do think it's a two-way street. So I appreciate you mentioning that, because change occurs not in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
It is a response to different inputs, right? So if I'm a leader and I'm not leading properly, and I have team members that are very valuable and they bring that up, I at least have the chance to listen to it. I at least have the chance to know about it, to understand the impact. So I appreciate that, not to absolve leaders, but to make it a cohesive set of responsibilities.
And I love how you said responsibilities, because that's what it's all about. It is really about not only is a responsibility to the organization to have well-being and long-term growth for that organization, and to frankly stay in business, but it's also interesting because I think the responsibility part is also what people cringe. They don't want responsibility. They don't want to be held accountable. So it's much easier to just say, hey, yes sir, sounds great, let's do it, versus being, wait a second, because all of a sudden now you're on the line. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
we're all being there. And it's like, and then you actually have a manager who's like, that sounds great. Why don't you run with that? And you're like, what? Me? And so, but we need to do more of that. We absolutely
That's
do.
awesome. Most people aren't prepared for the yes. And so
Exactly.
that is
Exactly.
great.
So let's not fool anybody. And being a leader is tough. And it's so easy for us to blame them for everything that's going wrong in organizations. So it's very important to say, hey, we need followers that are willing to speak up, take accountability and responsibility, and drive initiatives, right?
One of the things to continue with the book, because I'm loving the direction that we're going. The book is called The Leadership We Need, right? And you talk about the blueprint for a more balanced style of leadership, and we've alluded to that. You also get pretty gritty in terms of building a framework, giving us something that we can really unpack and think about. Can you walk us through the connect and adapt framework from the book?
Yeah. Yeah. So in the book, The Leadership We Need, I do have kind of a 10-step roadmap, if you will, but you can also, because of this show, and we probably don't have the time to go through all of that, I like to kind of simplify it by 3 domains. So the first domain to get to this type of leadership within an organization is to have a full representation of humanity, basically include the people, right, to actually lead the organization. So it's an inclusive environment that is welcoming to everybody. And I even have visuals usually in my public speaking that speaks to that. It actually will look something like this, going from that to ta-da! For those of you that is watching this on YouTube. So again, this is what we know in organizations everywhere. Very comfortable, being here before, 10,000 years, kind of where we started out today, right? Ta-da! Looks very different. Oh, uncomfortable. But hey, this is diversity of thought. This is our greatest asset in any organization, our greatest potential. So let's be clear about that. This is not our greatest potential, no matter how comfortable it feels. All right. So that's number one. The second framework that you really need to get in the mindset, and the full title of my book is The Leadership We Need, a new mindset for a bright future, right? So here's the second part of that mindset, and the frame is, here's what we have currently. At best, we have, the culture, that kind of your organization here, right? We need to start thinking, how can I even think about the industry that we're in? How can I collaborate possibly with other organizations? Is AI going to take out our entire industry? We don't know. But and what are the consequences of how we're running business today? Can we only look to shareholders, or should we really start thinking about stakeholders? Global citizenship, humanity, biodiversity, our impacts or effects on the environment, and what is the legacy of this organization? What do we want to leave for future generations, right? And of course, This is the West. Compete, compete, compete. This is my circle. I don't want to go there. Dominance, and then of course here is what I saw in Cameroon, more of the holistic, more of the we're on this together, service to life, right? Kind of mindset. So you can also see the Western type of leadership with indigenous type of leadership. Future generations are included. We can put this in a simple decision as cutting down a tree. You think about how it's going to affect the community, not just a shadow or shade over that hut, right? It's going to affect animals, insects, and how is it going to affect future generations that depend on that tree? So it's a beautiful way to think about, and of course, you need both, right? Balance, short term, long term. So that's the key. And the third part of that is, and this is where things get really interesting, the inner peak performance within us as an individual, as well as our society. Do we have a balanced view, and do we take both energies into account, the masculine and the feminine leadership traits, right, in leadership? Because this is true peak performance. This is our greatest potential, whether you're an individual or if you're a society. So you can think of, for example, I'm obviously, as I mentioned, originally from Sweden. Sweden is considered very well balanced. I mean, a lot of people, let's stop there. A lot of people think it's a female utopia. Let's change that. It's a human utopia, in the fact that we have a society that equally values and incentivizes the masculine leadership traits with the feminine leadership traits. Thus, we have peak performance. We're scoring the highest, not only on GDP, and GDP obviously is not really measuring what we want it to measure, but that's a whole nother discussion. But, we have profits, we have tons of innovations, we actually have more billionaires per capita than the United States, and yet we have a cradle to grave kind of system, right? We score the highest on well-being and happiness in the world. We score the highest on education. I mean, we have the model, and it's based on this balance. And of course, as a leader, and taking this to the individual leader, for those of you that are listening, that are leaders in your organizations, this is when you have a nice kind of balance between the two. Think about all the leadership tools you have here between these two. It just gives you great variety to meet your direct reports where they're at, right? And be able to fine-tune your leadership style based on what they need. Because you will have some that are more masculine and some that are more feminine. And that's great. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean, men and women, but just personalities that they have. And now you can actually tweak it and really start connecting with them where they're at, instead of constantly being here, right, in the masculine. Because you're going to lose a lot of people. Lots of people. Yeah. So that's when I talk about the importance of that. And then of course there's sub steps below that, and how to actually get in and get it done, and how it would be like, how a meeting would be conducted differently, right? Based on this. But these 3 steps is crucial to change cultures.
So that our folks can go out and get the book, tell me that full title again. So we have the leadership we need. What was the other components to that?
A new mindset for a brighter future. Yeah, and they might also be interested, we talk about, creating business cases, right? Mm-hmm. We know that with this constant masculine, like I would say, overvalue the masculine, monopolize monopolized masculinity that we've seen, it comes at a price. It comes at a price of, and I write about this in Forbes magazine, where I was featured, where, it cost 80% of disengagement in employees around the world. And that is equivalent to an $8.8 trillion productivity lost. Because I know, with this kind of masculinity type leadership that we're seeing in organizations. So, it's not just a nice to have. Let's be real. Just like we have the poly crisis, a direct uh, consequence of the masculinity that we've seen over the 10,000 years. We also have, of course, a direct consequence in our organizations, and that is the lack of engagement and well-being, as well as the lack of productivity, costing $8.8 trillion per year in lost productivity. So it's not like it's going unnoticed. I mean, the consequences are frankly just too great.
I really appreciate the data behind the methodology, because when I learn new things, and I'm learning, I've got a page full of notes. I always think about, how am I going to communicate to those that might be resistant to the message, right? And most of the folks that are living in that overvaluation of the masculine leadership, that alpha male, they do respond to data. They do have a fear of monetary loss. And what happens when you're trying to create change is, a lot of times people want to create change and they want people to feel good about it, totally believe in it. And that actually comes later. What comes first is, what is my motivation to change? And some people, it's an economic motive. But as they
Absolutely.
move in that direction, then they can become more holistically more fully understand the why behind it, the goodness of it. That sustains it. But to get people to start to change, we've got to move with their motive. So I like the data that I can use there. The other thing I wanted to ask and get a little bit more feedback: the hidden cost of being the smartest person in the room, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things I want to hear about, because I'll tell this super quick story, and then I want to give the floor back to you. Early in my technology career, my mentor, Grant Willard, I was employee number 7 at a technology startup. When we exited there, I became a CEO in my own right and those things. But I was going on my first set of sales calls with Grant, and we were in Iowa selling to manufacturers. And we went into this manufacturing building, and we're sitting around this large table with engineers. We're selling computer-aided design software. And so we leave the meeting, and Grant says to me, "What did you think about, your first meeting? What did you think about the room and different things?" And I said, "Well, Grant," I said, "I think I'm going to do okay in this business." He's like, "Well, what do you mean? This is your first meeting." I said, "Well, mostly if you just ask a few questions, these engineers will take over and just try to be the smartest in the room. And as long as I take good notes, right, I don't actually have to know very much. I just got to get them going." And he laughed, right? But when I hear you say that, that is a very typical thing, is people are trying to win the meeting versus solve the business problem. And so I'd love for you to unpack your view and your perspective on that impact, right, of always trying to be the smartest in the room.
Yeah, it is interesting because, again, going off script here, it's funny because that story makes me think about my first job getting into pharmaceutical sales. And I'm at the, University of Colorado, all, educational institution, the top-notch doctors, and of course, all the doctors in training, right? And you want to talk about competition and look the smartest among those doctors. And all you needed to do is like put a question out there, and they would just, have it going, right? But then, of course, sometimes it was also a competition of take me down, right? But I only knew my particular pharmaceutical that I represented. I didn't know, and the class, but I didn't know all about, drug interaction, et cetera, et cetera. So it reminds me of that. But that was always an interesting environment. But what I write about, and this is something I think I wrote for Fast Company, CEO magazine, is that, and I've been there myself as well, starting out this leadership consulting business, is that I really did think I was the smartest, which is such a blind spot. I know how to run this business. I came in with an amazing perspective from the Congo Basin Rainforest. I have, experience from working in corporate America. People are gonna, listen to me. And do I have this figured out, right? And of course, you realized it's isolating. It's not fun to be there. And it's so much work instead of trying to ask for help and ideas from others. And so I had to kind of learn it myself the hard way, starting this business. Just like I see and work with for a long time now, over a decade, with executive as an executive coach to some of the even top CEOs of Fortune 500 companies who like feel it's very isolating to think that you have all the answers, and how it also creates that disengagement that you and I were talking about earlier, because people want to be asked. They want to be, hey, what do you think? And so there's kind of a lose-lose there. Not only do you have to work extra hard and always, make sure you're the smartest or sound the smartest. It's a huge pressure. It's also isolating, and again, leads to disengagement on the team. So it would be a win-win situation to actually ask for help. Tell them, I don't have all the answers. Help, right? And it makes it more fun for everybody. And it brings in, and we dig into that diversity of thought, where really the best ideas and answers can rise to the surface by having that very inviting environment. But Donald, this is old school corporate America, and of course, is still very much alive. To have that little bit of quite a bit of that isolation, and thinking that you really need to come into the meeting fully prepared, having the answers, stating the obvious, and everybody take note and say yes, right? But it's not fun for anybody.
I really appreciate this conversation. I would ask of you if you have the opportunity to share the visuals so that we can put those into the show notes so our audience can get a chance to fully see them
Absolutely.
and be a part of what we're doing. And then also would love to give you space. How can people get in touch with you? How can people continue the conversation with you if they're so inclined, and where can they get the book?
Yeah, and thank you, Donald. And I think this vision that I'm speaking to, it's obviously one that we're all included in. And as I mentioned, I have blind spots. I've been there myself, even tried to be the smartest person in the room to realize I was not at all, just like with this book. Publisher, they're asked for a second edition, and I'm very eager to give a really good second edition. And I would love to hear other people's perspectives and what can improve. Please, that is the diversity of thought that is needed to get it right? So the book that I would love their feedback on is called The Leadership We Need, A New Mindset for a Brighter Future. They can connect with me either on my website, or maybe actually even better on LinkedIn under Maria Brinck, Brinck. And I would love to chat more there. Again, it's a work in progress and it's evolving. So, but I think many of us need to wake up and realize, hey, we can do better together. This is, and I do truly, Donald, I truly believe we talked about some tough stuff here today, but I really truly believe the future will be bright. I think that we can get this right, but it's gonna require getting a full representation of humanity into leadership, because as we started, everything rises and falls on leadership. So let's get that diversity in, diversity of thought, and we're gonna be good.
Maria, your perspective, amazing. The back and forth, I felt like I've known you for years, even though we just met, and I really appreciate the insight, and also the courageous leadership to reach outside of the norms, right? Because when you're trying to break something that's been in place for 10,000 years, right, you're swimming upstream a little bit, and that's
for sure.
And that's a courageous act. And so I really, really appreciate it, and sharing your roadmap. And so that is Maria Brinck. We are excited to have her a part of our team on High Octane Leadership. We will put all of her information in the show notes. And with that, DT, over and out. And thank you all for your time and attention on another episode of High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson.
Thank you, Donald.
Thank you for joining us on High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. Today's episode is a step in our collective journey towards leadership excellence. Remember, every story we share and every insight we gain is a piece in the puzzle of our leadership journey. For more insight and detail, hit the subscribe button so that we can stay connected. For deeper information and more episodes, go to donaldthompson.com. Continue to lead with vision and purpose, and until we meet again, embrace your role as a high-octane leader in the ever-evolving world of business.